So we're gonna today's show on a bit of a sad note. If you are a New York Jets fan and you have any kind of social media, you know who Bruce Reeder is. He was one of those larger than life um, sports fans. Somebody who just transcended whether you knew him, whether you were able to meet him or not. He was on many platforms. One of the biggest platforms is the New Era New York Jets group, and he was very widely known as one of the biggest gentlemen and one of the greatest just human beings that you would ever meet. And I had the pleasure of knowing him. I had the pleasure of being with him a few times in the D7 lot of MetLife Stadium. And that was, there's a couple of central sections. If you're a New York Jets fan, or even a New York Giants fan, just depending on whatever day it is, it's a different set of people. But everybody has their own tailgate spots. Everybody has like their group of friends and their sports family that they gravitate to. And now, a couple months ago, we ended up losing Artie Webb, who was somebody who showed up on newspapers and TV, and like he had a face paint and helmet, and like he was very, very quickly identifiable. Bruce was more of just somebody who just loved the New York Jets, and he just loved people. He was he would have connections with people. He'd remember you. He'd remember, all the, whatever fun anecdote stuff that you would come up with. For me, he used to like the fact that I called him dude, because I guess a lot of people didn't call him dude growing up, or whatever the case was. But he had that aura about him. He was just somebody who, when you met him, you became family, and it was very warm welcomes. It was very genuine, very, very pure. And unfortunately, he lost his battle with cancer yesterday. It's a very big mourning period for New York Jets fans, and I just want to send my love and condolences to his family and to all the other Jets nation that really knew him. Unfortunately, it's sad that in these sports situations, a lot of times if somebody just follows one team, it's kind of, they're not widely known by everybody. So I think everybody has their own, has these kinds of people in their fan base, like, the bigger, the larger than life ones, the ones that everybody knows who they are when you interact with them. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think a lot of times in sports, when people have these like banter talks and they're like, "Oh, New York Jets suck," and just to name a few, they could be Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns. I mean, you name it. It all it varies from team to team, but it's pretty much the same argument for everybody. And it's like, oh, like, how could you follow this team? Like, why don't you just join another team? Like, it's not that simple. A lot of times you'll gain extended family from these sports relationships, and this is why a lot of times when people talk about, like, let's say, like, oh, the New York Jets suck, like, somebody might take it really personally, because it's not like you're saying, like, the team sucks, even though that is exactly what one would be saying. They take it to a deeper level, because as far as I'm concerned, in this particular situation, the New York Jets are a family more than the actual football team that plays 16 Sundays, which will be 17 this upcoming season. But it's more than just the games. It's more than just the game results. Like the Jets can go 4-12 or 3-13, and like they'll still be your faithful people going there every week because you're just going there to see family. It's a central area where different extended families coming together, and yes, they're coming for the actual games itself, but it's really the home atmosphere, and it's the reunion. It's basically like a day at the beach, or if you're a picnic in the park, a barbecue, any kind of celebrations like graduations and birthday parties, kids' birthday parties, whatever brings people together. Like this is what brings everybody together in these one central spots. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, when the last time I went to a game, I ended up going. I went to a couple of games in this during the season, and then toward the end of the season, I was like, I'll just wait until next year. And you never really know what's going to happen after that. Like who would have known that a global pandemic would have happened, and you end up losing two people that you considered as your loved ones, like two people that you go to for these reunions, and it's just really really sad. And it hits every fan base at a certain point, because these extended families is just like losing a loved one uh, from any scale, whether it just be sports, and or just be like actual family members. A lot of times like the lines just get blurred, and you just have a genuine love for people. And I know me growing up, I mentioned it a couple of times on the show. I've always loved sports, and I've always growing up, I didn't know a lot of people who love sports the way I did. And in a lot of situations, not only would people look at me like I was, crazy for liking sports the way I do, and having like these kind of side interventions, like, oh, maybe you should like other things, maybe you should branch off to different situations. And then we're in a it's a situation now that, you know, thanks to social media and being able to meet other fans in these at because of the you share the same favorite teams. It's been an absolute blessing to meet people who actually love sports the way I do, and some people that are actually crazier than I am when it comes to sports. It's 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 a special thing that a lot of people, like, only really sports fans would know in this situation. But I think it goes to a deeper meaning if if people meet up together because they like the same kind of movie or the same kind of TV show, and then they end up meeting each other, and like it extends on to different things. It's just your extended family that you get from the interests that you love, and it really hurts deep when these tragic situations happen. And I just want to send my love to Bruce's family, as his wife, and the rest of Jets Nation that's really hurting at this point. So we'll switch gears to other news. We have NBA basketball now. That is absolutely we're embarking on a time where we're going into a bit of an unprecedented time. Usually basketball goes into these kind of predictable scenarios where the top team ends up winning, and like they basically, it's just kind of like a formality that they have to go through these playoff rounds, and one with the first seed always beats the eighth seed, and like the higher teams always end up winning, and the teams that have the MVP are the ones that actually really make it to the top, like make it at least to the finals, and then end up eventually winning most of the time. We're in a situation now where the two first seeds in each conference were bumped out in the second round, which is the first time that's happened since 1994. And the eventual the MVP of the league, Nikola Jokic, is not in the playoffs anymore. He ended up getting eliminated in the second round by the Los Angeles Clippers. So, this is a new era. This is where the tide is turning in the NBA. You don't have your big three on a team that's dominating, and like your superstar teams, like all of those are in the back burners, and they are now we have like just young team, a bunch of young blood, and we have teams that just haven't won for a really long time, if at all. The Clippers, the Hawks, and the Milwaukee Bucks have never won the championships in their franchise's history, and the sorry, the what is it, Clippers, Bucks, and the Nets are actually out. The New Jersey, sorry, the Brooklyn Nets were a big ended up being one of the big three that classically you would have thought would have made it into the deeper rounds of the playoffs, but they ended up getting eliminated, unfortunately, because of injury, which we've talked about on this show many times, would have been their one Achilles heel. And unfortunately, James Harden ended up having a hamstring issue that he tried to play through games 5, 6, and 7. He really tried to play through. He played over 40 minutes each game, and he was just historically he's been not the greatest postseason performer. This year was no different when it comes to the black and white version of it. But if you really know the situation, he was really hurt, and it was just amazing that he was actually able to just play at all, which he did with Kyrie Irving. The starting point guard was unavailable after Game 2 when he hurt himself. So it was a dark situation there. But right now we have the Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks facing off against each other. That happened last night, and it's the coming out party of Trae Young. The 22-year-old point guard has absolutely taken the NBA by storm right now, and it's tough for me as a Knicks fan because I root against the Hawks every night now. Like I've really just rooted against them at all costs, but they are actually they're a well-rounded team. They have the big bodies with Capella and Collins controlling the paint area, and getting rebounds, and getting in tough putbacks, and just the outright lights out shooting that they go through. Like it seems like they go through just periods where they'll have like one quarter where they just shoot like 75% or 80% from the field, and it comes from all areas. It comes from the 3-point land with Trae Young and Hurler and Bogdanovich, and yeah, it's just a well-rounded team. And when you look at the Bucks versus the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Atlanta Hawks, you look at them pound for pound, and it's very plausible that the Atlanta Hawks can make their first championship stance ever going into the NBA Finals. And the Milwaukee Bucks, who were perennial chokers, just getting to this stage and then not being able to get over the hump. They've been able to do it successfully. They ended up losing the first game yesterday, but they lost the first 2 games to New Jersey before taking the Brooklyn before taking the entire series in 7 games. So it's very possible that they'll be able to take this series. It seems evenly matched, but at the same time, the Hawks seem to be the more well-rounded team, and they're just absolutely on fire. They're just taking the league by storm, and it'll be a very interesting season to see who ends up representing the East, which, like if you look at the Bucks and the Hawks, somebody who hasn't followed basketball all year or the last couple of years, they'd be like, oh, wow, like where did these two teams come from? But, it's a rejuvenation season in basketball, and I think you have new fan bases who are from Milwaukee and Atlanta, and like they're all fired up, which absolutely helps the NBA, I think, at this point. And you have your bandwagon fans who end up gravitating toward one or the other, and it's just I think it's an amazing display going on here. And it's exciting. Like for me, usually when the Knicks are out, I'm like out of basketball completely. But it's such compelling stories going on night after night with your new blood, and it's not like the same old story with like the LeBron James super teams or anybody else who has like a full team, a team of superstars together. It's what basketball is, and parity is what is designed to do, and we're seeing it now. we have the what is it, the number 3 seed and the number 5 seed going against each other in the East, and the 5 seed has never won the NBA championship. The lowest seed has it's happened one time. It was the 6 seed, ended up winning the NBA championship. So the Hawks would be making some history there if they end up taking this all the way. But first things first, they have to win 3 more games against the Milwaukee Bucks. And on the other side, we have very compelling stories from the Phoenix Suns, who absolutely stole Game 2. They're winning their series 2 games to 0, and one of the biggest storylines with that is that Chris Paul has been unavailable because of COVID protocols, and the Suns were lucky enough to have a sweep in their second round series against the Denver Nuggets. So they were the 4 game sweep. Then the Chris Paul news came up, which there's talk that he's vaccinated. So it's like kind of weird that there's a COVID situation going on. But I think that's a little bit of a deeper issue as far as I'll just keep it to the sports and keep the politics out of it. So when it comes to the Chris Paul is not has been unavailable for the last 2 games. He's considered probable for tonight's game. So he's if he doesn't come back now, he's definitely on his way back. But let's tip our caps to the Phoenix Suns, who's been able to take a 2-0 series lead on the Utah. I'm sorry, at the on the Los Angeles Clippers without their top star. And on the other end, there's the Los Angeles Clippers have not been without Kawhi Leonard, who after his monster game and monster dunk on the Utah Jazz, he ended up having a severe knee injury. It's not widely known what exactly the injury is, but he's hurting. He's hurting enough not to play, which for any superstar stature, that must be like a really, really grueling pain. Because if you have Joel Embiid, who was playing, the most of the second half of the season and all through the playoffs with a torn meniscus in his knee, which hampered his effectiveness, and it ultimately cost the 76ers a big part of the reason why they weren't able to take the Atlanta Hawks down. It's very telling that this is a very serious injury, and there's some talk that he might come back, but it's a trade of two future Hall of Famers that are not available for their respective teams, and it's going to get down to the situation where if Chris Paul comes back, they'll be at pretty much 100%, and they'll be going against a Clippers team that is really reeling right now, down 2 games to 0. But the LA Clippers actually lost their first 2 games in the first 2 rounds of each series, respectively. So this is not unfamiliar territory for them. They'll have the they have the rest of the series to try to get it together. But with Chris Paul coming back, it's going to be very hard for the Clippers to advance. All right, so we'll move on to hockey now. So in the NHL playoffs, we have a situation where last night the New York Islanders, in local news, ended up getting to even series. They won Game 6 last night after getting the doors blown off of them in Game 5. They lost Game 5 8-0. Looked like they were dead in the water. A lot of social media outlets and everybody else is just basically getting ready for Tampa Bay to just clean up this game, and that's it. Game 6 comes around last night. This future Hall of Fame star Nikita Kucherov ended up getting hurt on the first shift of the first period of his first shift of the first period, and he was unavailable. And this is the same Nikita Kucherov who was injured for the regular season and then came into the playoffs, which made the Tampa Bay Lightning $17 million over the cap, which has been a heavy talked about subject in their playoff run as being deemed as unfair, as a disadvantage to what's going on with the playoffs and the rest of the league. So he ends up getting hurt, and it kept the Islanders were able to take advantage. They were down 2-zip, and then they ended up chipping away. They scored a goal in the second. They scored a game-tying goal in the third. They went into overtime, and then within 2 minutes, Anthony Beauvillier was able to beat Andre Vasilevsky, and we are heading to a Game 7 tomorrow night. This is very exciting, and we've talked in the past on past shows about the importance of a New York team uh, having a long playoff run and being successful and making it, ultimately bringing a championship to New York. Right now, the New York Islanders are in the driver's seat there, and they are, if they're able to take this game, which is it's a big if because now they have to go back into Tampa, in a series that they ended up. Last time they were there were a couple nights ago, and they ended up losing 8-zip. So, it's one thing to lose. I mean, to win a game in Nassau Coliseum. When you have the fans behind you and the energy, and that's one barn. One of the loudest places to play historically in the playoffs. And now you have that situation, like that they're leaving that situation and they're going back to the Tampa Bay, where they haven't had the biggest amount of success. They ended up splitting games 3 and 4, so they're basically 1 and 2 going into this next game at Tampa. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening there. I think as far as New York goes, this is a exciting time for New York. Obviously, there's a whole Islanders fan base that has been just rejuvenated from after, like the franchise itself has won four Stanley Cup championships in a row from 1980 to 1984, and then after that, it's been just an absolutely abysmal stretch of years, decades where they haven't done much. They weren't able to, make the playoffs. They've been scraping into the playoffs. 2016 was the first time they won a playoff series since 1993. So we're looking at big gaps of years where they haven't been very effective, and for a fan base that has been deprived for so long, they've been reawakened, and it's been a great, it's been from an objective standpoint, it's great to see, like a bunch of New Yorkers that usually are just getting ready for baseball at this point, and like not having not having a major interest in hockey and things like that. Like they're still into it. Like they're like, oh yeah, like we have like a winning team now, and like a team that can make a great run, and that's what they're doing. This is the exact same matchup in the East in the semifinal round. Last year it was the Eastern Conference Finals, but pretty much it's all the same thing. It's just two teams going against each other in the semifinal round to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. Last year, Tampa Bay was able to win in 6 games. And now it seems like the New York Islanders, they retooled, and they retooled with the idea of having to face Tampa again and then eventually being able to beat them. Right now, they have that opportunity to do that tomorrow night, and that would put them in the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since 1984, and that would be amazing for the city and hockey in general in New York. Now, there's also the other side of the coin where unfortunately in New York we have 2 teams for every sport. So you have your Ranger fans, your New York Ranger fans. Like that's a part of New York that's not really supporting. For the most part, the New York Islanders. If you look at it, there's I've had a lot of conversations with New York Ranger fans, and obviously I know more of them because that's the team that I follow. But there is maybe I want to say 85%, 80. I'd say 80 to 20. So 80% of them are just looking for their rivals, the New York Islanders, to go away and to end up losing, and no matter who ends up beating them, if it's a team of if it's a team basically of all their ex-girlfriends and ex-wives like all on one team, they'll end up rooting for that team over the Islanders. Like there's just no way around it, and they just are gonna root against them no matter what. So that 80% is going against them. But then there's this 20% that actually it's a lot more than I would assume. That they're actually sticking with, like, all right, so this is for New York, and you know, if if New York's in it, then I'm still gonna root for them. It's actually it's dividing a lot of the New York Rangers fan base, and even the New York Islanders too, because like the New York Islanders, a lot of their fans are like looking for the New York support when we all know that between the years of 2012, 2016, which is the last time the Rangers were in Stanley Cup contention and perennial on the top of the standings every year, with one conference finals, two conference finals appearance, and one um, conference three conference finals appearance and one Stanley Cup finals appearance. We all know that the New York Islanders weren't, like, no fans were rooting for them because they was from New York. So it's a big split in the fans. It's been very interesting there. But this is all positive stuff when it comes to building hockey in New York. And I think that my main thing is always looking at the bigger picture. And New York slowly is turning into more of a hockey town or a hockey acceptable town. We go, with me growing up, 20, 25 years ago, that wasn't much of a big thing. It was the Rangers won the cup, and it seemed like a couple years afterward, like that was pretty much it. As far as inner cities go, like where I'm from, and it's just from the inner city side, when you come to like Bronx, Brooklyn, it was just hockey is just completely irrelevant. And now it's to the point where it's actually, it's relevant. Like you walk around, like you see New York Rangers gear, you see New York Islanders gear, and I think all it is it's a positive moving forward when it comes to hockey in New York. And what's the one thing that's going to take it to the next level is one of these teams end up taking it to the house and they end up winning the championship. And now we went from a scenario last year where it probably wouldn't have been all that special because there would have been no real big parade in the Canyon of Heroes or going down Lower Manhattan. Now it's to the point where everything's opened up again. We're kind of like returning more to normalcy. We have packed houses. Like now, let's say if the New York Islanders end up winning the Stanley Cup, they're going to have a parade in the Canyon of Heroes, and it's going to generate a lot of revenue for the businesses down there. It's going to generate a lot of hockey buzz within New York. I'm sure their run is already gaining more new hockey fans, and that will just continue to grow in itself. Winning is what builds everything, and success is what builds all great businesses, and that's what will be happening now. Now, as far as the New York Rangers go, they are on their way up, but they're not there yet. And the New York Islanders are really primed to, in a situation where if they do win tomorrow, they'll be in the Stanley Cup, and all eyes will be on them. All of New York's eyes will be on them, whether they end up winning it or not. It will be a great step in the right direction when it comes to the actual growth of the brand of hockey in New York. Man, Rangers fans are not going to like that, but at the end of the day, that's what it does. Like hockey breeds everything. Like when the New York Rangers, when they were making their run, 2014, 2015, there were big crowds of people. I remember specifically there was big crowds in Bryant Park and Herald Square. There was big viewing parties, and there were a lot of people were there. A lot of people were like, and all of them weren't actual hockey fans, but they just went for the good time. They went for the fun, and generated a lot of revenue for the businesses, and there's a lot of positives that came from that. And with them having the lull for a while, and then every New York team really having this lull. I mean, there's nobody's the last team to win a championship in New York was the Giants in 2011. So we're already 10 years on that, and having 8 teams going at it, you would think the percentages would be a little better, but that's where New York is in that regard. And there's some great hockey going on. So on the other side, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, who were the de facto number 1 team after the playoffs reseeded when they beat the President Trophy winning Colorado Avalanche, and they ran into the buzzsaw that is the Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens finished with 56 points, and they were actually 18th overall in the entire league. So in a normal playoff season, where you have the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference, they would have not made the playoffs. Or would have been like a lot of a stickier situation. They ended up having like the dominoes ended up falling where they were in a good division that didn't that kind of bottomed out really bottomed out, and they were able to make that fourth and final playoff spot in their respective division, and they ended up beating the top seeded Toronto Maple Leafs after being down 3-1. They came back and won the next 3 games and beat them. And then in the next series, they beat the Winnipeg Jets 4-0. They did not trail in any game at any point, not even for 1 minute in that whole series. They just completely dominated the Winnipeg Jets. And now they're in a situation where they are up 3-2 on the Vegas Golden Knights, and there's one more game left in that series, and they can either win tonight, or if the Vegas Golden Knights end up winning, which the game is in Montreal, then the series will move back to Game 7 in Las Vegas on Saturday. So big developments there, and if you think about it, the Montreal's had everything stacked against them because of the playoff format and all of Canada being in one division. They were lined up with the Western Conference teams, so they're basically just going east coast, west coast, like just going back and forth, and they're doing well. They've been able to withstand the storms of the Vegas Golden Knights, and one issue was at the end of Game 3 where Marc-Andre Fleury ended up botching a play down at the net that he ended up giving up the game-tying goal with less than 2 minutes left in the game. And then eventually the Montreal Canadiens were able to win the game in overtime. That seems to have completely changed the series, and it opened up the door for the backup goaltender Robin Lerner, who in the beginning of the year, if you looked at the way the Golden Knights were set up, they were supposed to be 50-50 in their goaltending, with Marc-Andre Fleury, who's 38 years old, and then Robin Lerner, who they had just acquired in the mid-season of the year before and signed to an extension. They were supposed to go half and half, but mostly Robin Lerner was supposed to be the de facto starter, pretty much 60-40, I'd say the split there. And then Robin Lerner ends up getting hurt, unfortunately, with a concussion. So Marc-Andre Fleury was pressed into action, and he ended up having a Vezina candidate season where he's one of the 3 finalists to win the Vezina Trophy, which is the top goaltender in the NHL for this past regular season. So, it's a situation where he's started most of the playoffs. As far as the Vegas Golden Knights journey has gone, they went to 7 games with the Minnesota Wild, and Fleury played all 7 of those games, winning 4 and losing 3. And then the first game of the Colorado Avalanche series is where Robin Lerner made his postseason debut and absolutely got shelled. So Marc-Andre Fleury played the rest of that series, winning 4 out of the 5 games. And after starting the first 3 games, the semifinal round against the Montreal Canadiens, he split the games, but then also had that one issue with the puck handling, which unfortunately was a blunder, but it was one really, really huge blunder that ended up costing him the game. And then they went to Robin Lerner the game after, and then he ended up winning the game 2-1. Marc-Andre Fleury played the last game, Game 5, 2 days ago, and then he ended up taking the loss. So now there's a major talk that Robin Lerner is going to take the slot for Game 5, for Game 6 now, which is do or die, and it's just a sticky situation. Historically, if there's a there's no real goalie tandem that has won the Stanley Cup finals. Every Stanley Cup champion has like that one goaltender that they ride on, and 9 times out of 10 he gets the 16 wins unless there's some kind of like injury bug or some kind of thing that happens. But there's one de facto goalie that ends up riding the whole way. You would think in this day and age with the splitting of everything, like the NFL running backs, there's no real dominant 30-35 carry um, running back anymore. Usually everything's like split, like with a running back one, running back two, and they do situational and they try to break up everything. So with this situation, like that mentality moving on to the goaltenders who are usually like rock solid and in a regular season, like the 70 start goalies out of 82 games, that seems to be dying with the running backs who get like 35 carries a game, and that splitting time is what's seems to be paramount. So eventually, you would think the odds would be that a team would win a championship with having like a tandem pair of goalies that are really really good. We'll see if the Vegas Golden Knights are going to be able to accomplish that, because right now their back is against the wall, and if Robin Lerner is not sharp, it looks like the Montreal Canadiens will be able to advance, and they've been riding Carey Price, who's a perennial Hall of Famer in himself, and who has not won a Stanley Cup, so always he's always been driven to win a Stanley Cup. He has won. He has not made the Stanley Cup Finals at all. He's had 2 appearances in the conference finals and lost both times. So it's a very very exciting time for Montreal and the country of Canada, because Canada hasn't had a winner since the Montreal Canadiens won in 1993. They haven't even had they haven't had many representatives even go into the Stanley Cup Finals. It's been a really long drought for them, so it's an exciting time. I'd say most of Canada that doesn't hate Montreal. There's a lot of like the fans in Toronto and Winnipeg, and to equate the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens were basically like the New York Yankees of hockey. They have the 24 championships, and a lot of their championships were won in the younger years before like heavy expansion and really diverse. Really like 30 team leagues that we enjoy today. So it's very subjective, and a lot of people hate them. Depending on rivalries, the same way that like we theoretically we should all be rooting in New York. We should all be rooting for the New York Islanders because they're all New York anyway. But since there's the rivalries, and it's impossible for most of Ranger Nation to want the New York Islanders to do well in the playoffs, and that would be the same thing that would happen with the Montreal Canadiens. Even though you would think the whole country of Canada would want they want somebody to bring it home. They have 7 teams. They haven't been able to bring a Stanley Cup back in over 30 years, and it's been a really long drought. And it's Canada is synonymous with synonymous with hockey, so they go together like pretty much like peanut butter and jelly. And that it's in a way it's weird that a Stanley Cup champion hasn't emerged from one of the Canadian teams, but at the same time, every single team that wins the Stanley Cup every single year has at least more than half their roster is Canadian anyway. So it's not like they're not, it's not like the Canadian stamp is not on every single Stanley Cup that it's ever won. But it is weird, not to have it actually home, and not having it in the motherland of where hockey would be. So So I got to say, um, there's a very, very possible that the Stanley Cup could be the Montreal Canadiens versus the New York Islanders. And I think that would be I think that would be the underdog special, and I think that pound for pound, hockey wise, and just um, following the game and being like a purist enthusiast and just wanting things new, like what's going on in the NBA, you would want the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders to win, because that would be the pretty much the two perennial droughts that could end, um, where you have a team who hasn't won since 1983 or 1984, and another team that hasn't won since 1993. Then on the flip side, you have the Tampa Bay Lightning, who won last year, so it's kind of like the same old, same old. So there's a lot of fans that are bitter towards them, with having their being $17 million over the cap, and not like kind of being spoiled, even though like obviously this has been a long time coming, that Tampa Bay has been building this juggernaut that they enjoy today. And the Vegas Golden Knights, who have only been in existence for 4 years. If you look at a lot of the widespread opinion is that they were given a hand-picked roster and a hand-picked team that has dominated since day one. They have dominated since day one, but I believe that it was a lot of work put into the forefront that made that roster as great as it was, and it was a lot of what you wouldn't expect. Like you had William Karlsson, for example, who was a 41 goal scorer, or he's hit over 40 for 2 seasons already, being in the Golden Knights. But before that, his he had 6 goals in his rookie year, and the next year he had 9. So it was not exactly it wasn't like the Vegas Golden Knights acquired a 40-goal scorer, like a proven 40-goal scorer. He developed into one, and they had a lot of deals where the teams ended up where different teams like Florida, they were like, all right, so pick Riley Smith, and then we'll trade you Jason Marchessault, and if you end up just picking this guy, like they did that with 2 or 3 different teams, and they built this incredible roster, and it was the misfits, is what they've called themselves, and that's what that was the mantra that they ended up getting to the Stanley Cup Finals with in their first season, and now charging ever since. The work that was put in the forefront to make this a great team wasn't done like it wasn't like the NHL handpicked it, and it wasn't I don't know if it was just like a lot of people just think, oh, like and the NHL wanted a successful team in Vegas so that they could, up the sports betting and things like that. It wasn't really. I think it was just a situation where a team was focused on wheeling and dealing their way to the top, and they ended up successfully doing that. And one of the main benefits of it was the fact that they were an expansion team that came in on their own. So it wasn't like they had to compete, because in past years, in past expansions like 1993, where it was the Florida Panthers and the Florida Panthers and sorry, this escapes me at the moment. San Jose Sharks. So they came in together, and they had to go, tit for tat on who they ended up picking from different teams, and that ends up diluting the pool when it comes to one team. But then you had the Vegas Golden Knights, who came in on their own, and they didn't have any other competition but themselves. So that I think that would be the one benefit to their success, more than just the NHL handpicking them a team, and wanting them to be successful, and doing everything in their power to make it a situation where they're just gonna be on top. So there are a lot of fans that hate them for that, though. There's a lot of the long-standing, the long-suffering fans. Teams that have followed NHL for like 30 years and haven't really been successful. Like they're basically jealous, because they view the Golden Knight fans as not having to go through the hardships. Like they just basically went from like no team or no interest all the way into success, and they haven't felt like they've paid their dues as far as sports goes or being a sports fan goes. But it's situational, and that's why we love this game, is because basically fans could just do whatever they want. Any way that people find joy in sports, I think I always support it, whether they want to be bandwagon fans or loyal fans. Obviously it's better when they're loyal fans, but it's at the end of the day, it's all about fun. It's all about getting out there and having a great time, and just enjoying sports, because sports is made to be enjoyed. So we'll touch base on baseball while we have a couple of minutes left, and in the Battle of New York. So the New York Mets right now have been in first place the whole season, and one of the biggest success story that has come out of New York baseball wise is Jacob DeGrom, who ends up he's given up 4 earned runs this whole season to a .50 ERA. So 0.50 ERA, which is just absolutely insane. It's especially at this point of the season. It's okay to do it, every now and then, or even like there's some relievers that'll end up, like accruing a very low ERA, but it's impressive all the same. But to have a starting pitcher do it and regularly, to only give up 4 runs in 2 months or over 2 months of baseball is just absolutely insane. And then on top of that, since he's in the National League, he's batting over 450 with 6 RBIs. So he's driven in more runs than he's actually given up. And it's just it's an amazing story. And I think a lot of fans want to compare, who's the best pitcher in New York and things like that. Like, there's absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind that the best pitcher is Jacob DeGrom. It's very fair to say he's the best player in the baseball player in New York as well. Unfortunately, because you have like your Yankees, I think the Yankees have a better overall team than the New York Mets, but the New York Mets are coming, and they're coming hard. And that's been their idea ever since Steve Cohen ended up taking the team. He wanted to take them to the next level, and I don't think he's done it as fast as he's wanted to. There's been a lot of swings and misses when it's come to free agencies, but now they're building. They're doing the same thing the Knicks did, where they're building a winner, they're building wins, and like the more attractive pieces that you have on your team, the more free agents want to come, and they want to be that missing link to eventually win a championship or have like a long sustained success. So the New York Mets right now are building their way toward that distinction while being in first place. Yes, they are in the weakest division of the National League, but they're capitalizing on it so far. What's going to be very exciting is next weekend the New York Yankees and New York Mets will have a 3-game series, and that'll be pretty exciting as far as New York baseball goes. We'll definitely have more getting into next week as the playoffs die down with the rest of the teams, and we'll have a couple baseball specialists come in, and we'll break down a lot of baseball. We haven't talked a lot of baseball because we have an hour show, and there's just so much going on in the NBA right now and the NHL right now. So as these championships end up winding down to their championship series, and then eventually completing, we'll get more into baseball. But then you have the New York Yankees, who were down for a very, very long time, and then they ended up waking up. They gained 4.5 games in the standings off of first place in 1 week. That was this past week, and they're charging hard. They're getting their act together. One thing that I love, who's very underrated, is Gary Sanchez. Gary Sanchez has had a very turbulent very turbulent group of seasons where he started off very, very hot coming in the gate, and basically carried the whole team for the month of September in his inaugural year. And then you would think, you just think that he can do that all the time. And then he went through his lulls of defensive lapses, and then he wasn't able to hit, and he's hitting 200 almost for the last 2 seasons. And the last couple of weeks, he's been really turning it up. the last 18 games, he has 8 homers and batting over 350, which is just incredible. It's what every fan of Gary Sanchez would want him to be. Is exactly what he's doing right now. So, um, the longer he's able to do that, the better it'll be for the New York Yankees. They are getting healthy now. They have Luke Voigt, who's just come out from the injured list. DJ LeMahieu was on the list for a little bit. He seems to be coming back up from his MVP season last year, and it's just there's a lot of exciting baseball coming up. And if the New York Islanders aren't able to win a championship in these next 2 months, which is debatable whether they can or not. Well, I'll just have to see what happens. Then that there's a big talk that one of the baseball teams, both will be in the playoffs. It would be almost impossible for both of them not to be in the playoffs at this point. So whether they're a higher seed or just scraping in with the eight team format that they have nowadays. So it'll be interesting to see if they can actually make it down to the end. Who knows? So, all right. So that is our show for this week. My name is Alfonso Caldero. We'll be back next week with a special guest. All right. See you next time. Thank you.